I remember the first time she held my gaze longer than necessary. It wasn't dramatic, no grand entrance, no spotlight. Just the way her eyes lingered on mine, as if testing whether I'd look away first. I didn't. And in that silence, something unspoken shifted. She was older, that much was obvious, but not in the way people usually meant. There was a steadiness in her, a kind of grace that made the air around her feel calmer, heavier at the same time. I was 20-something, still stumbling through the raw edges of adulthood. And yet with her, I forgot the noise of the rest of the world. We were sitting too close. I knew it, and so did she. Her hand brushed mine. Casual, maybe accidental, but the warmth lingered like it was meant to stay. I didn't move away. Neither did she. The room was quiet except for the faint hum of the ceiling fan. It should have been ordinary, but nothing about that evening felt ordinary. My chest tightened with the kind of anticipation you can't explain, like waiting for a note of music you don't know but already love. "You shouldn't look at me like that," she murmured, her voice soft but not playful. "How am I looking at you?" I asked, though I already knew. She didn't answer. Her lips parted slightly, then closed again as if the words betrayed her before they could reach me. Instead, she tilted her head, eyes narrowing just a little, like she was memorizing my face before deciding whether to step closer or turn away. Her scent, something faintly floral with the warmth of skin, settled between us, and I found myself leaning in, not enough to cross a line, but enough to feel the edges of it pressing against me. "I'm not used to being seen," she said after a pause, her tone slipping into something she hadn't planned to reveal. The confession surprised me. She carried herself like someone who had always been noticed, maybe even admired. But seen, that was different. I swallowed, my throat dry. "Then let me." Her eyes softened, but her shoulders tensed, as if she wanted to believe me and feared it at the same time. She looked away for a second, her fingers tightening around the edge of her glass, before letting it go. Then, slowly, she turned her palm upward and let it rest between us, open, waiting, not for an answer, but for a choice. I placed my hand in hers. Not firmly, not claiming, just enough for her to know I wouldn't pull away. Her skin was warm, and the faint tremor in her fingers made my pulse stumble. For a moment, the world shrank down to that small point of contact. Nothing else mattered, not the difference in age, not the quiet rules we were breaking by simply being this close. Just the silent agreement in the way her thumb brushed over mine. "You don't know what you're asking for," she whispered, almost to herself. "Maybe not," I admitted. "But I know I don't want to leave." Her gaze locked on mine again, sharper this time, searching for cracks in my resolve. I didn't flinch. And then, just as her lips parted, just as the air between us felt on the verge of breaking open, a sudden knock at the door. She froze, her hand tightening around mine once before slipping away, leaving my skin cold where her warmth had been. We both turned toward the sound, hearts caught in the silence. The door began to open. The knock faded before anyone answered, leaving the room suspended in a quiet that felt too loud. She stayed near the door for a moment, hand brushing the wood, as if it could shield her from the thoughts she hadn't yet spoken. I waited, pretending to check my phone, though every nerve in me was alert to her. She turned back toward me, slow, deliberate, and something in the line of her jaw and the tilt of her head told me she'd always been careful. Careful with attention, careful with trust. Maybe the kind of careful that comes from having loved and lost more than she wanted to admit. I could see it in the faint crease between her brows, in the subtle tension in her shoulders. She moved closer, just enough that our legs brushed, and I felt the heat spike behind my chest. My gaze caught the curve of her neck, the warmth in her hair, the way her presence pressed into the air around me. I haven't done this in a long time," she said, voice low. She didn't clarify what this was, whether it was the conversation, the closeness, or the undeniable tension, but it wasn't important. I understood anyway. I nodded, unsure how to respond. I was 22, inexperienced in this particular gravity, but old enough to feel its pull. My own history, brief, abrupt, full of restless dating and shallow flings, felt pale against hers. I had never stayed. She had stayed too long, stayed too alone. Maybe that was why we fit, yet also why it scared her. She moved, brushing past me almost by accident, and our arms grazed. It was brief, fleeting, but enough to send a jolt down my spine. I wanted to apologize, but she didn't. She didn't look embarrassed, just aware. "You're noticing," she murmured, almost to herself. Her gaze met mine in a fleeting second, and then she looked away. "You notice things too much." "I can't help it," I said softly. You make it hard not to." Her lips curved just slightly, almost a smile, before the tension returned, tightening around her like a well-fitted coat. She glanced down at her hands, then back up, and I saw the hesitation, the measure of risk she weighed silently. The age gap, the social perception, the unspoken rules we were flirting with. I reached out, letting my fingers brush the back of her hand. She didn't pull away this time. Instead, she lingered a fraction longer than expected, breath catching just slightly, and the air between us seemed to hum. It was a simple touch, too small to mark anything permanent, but enough to confirm what neither of us wanted to say aloud. Time slowed for a moment. The fan's hum, the faint scent of coffee, the warmth of her presence, they all converged into an almost unbearable gravity. I could feel the pulse in her wrist against my fingertips, the subtle rise of her chest as she breathed, the way she held herself just close enough to tease and pull away at the same time. And then she withdrew, just a hair's breadth, leaving me wanting more, but also certain. Certain that whatever hesitation or fear existed between us, it didn't erase the spark that had just flared and refused to die. I caught her glance over my shoulder as she moved toward the window, a small, almost imperceptible acknowledgement. It said more than words ever could. The hum of the fan was drowned out by the sudden vibration of a phone on the table. I glanced at it, her name flashing, and froze. She didn't notice, too absorbed in leaning just a little closer than necessary. I could see it in the way her shoulder brushed mine and the small, almost imperceptible tremor in her hand. I swallowed. "Is that?" She glanced at the screen, lips tightening. "Just a message. It's nothing." Her eyes flicked back to me, warmer now, and I felt my pulse spike. "Nothing," she said, but the way she looked at me said otherwise. The knock at the door from earlier still lingered in my chest, a reminder of how fragile this moment was. Anyone could walk in. Anyone could see. And yet, here we were, standing so close that I could feel the heat of her body against mine without touching. Her fingers brushed my arm, again, almost accidentally, and my breath caught. I wanted to close the distance, to lean into her warmth, but a voice in my head reminded me of the risk, the age difference, the judgments, the messy consequences if someone noticed. Her gaze held mine, steady, searching, and I realized she was feeling it too. The hesitation in her eyes mirrored the hesitation in my own chest. Our proximity had created a tension that was almost unbearable, a magnetic pull neither of us dared to name. "You shouldn't," she started, voice low, then stopped. "Shouldn't what?" I whispered, leaning ever so slightly forward, trying to read her unspoken words. Her lips parted for a fraction of a second, and the smell of her perfume, or maybe just the warmth of her skin, hit me. My hand itched to reach up, to trace the line of her jaw, but I stayed frozen, afraid to break the fragile spell. A beat later, a knock at the window startled us both. She jumped slightly, her hand brushing mine again. That small contact made my chest tighten, heart racing. The moment was broken, but it didn't vanish. Not entirely. We stepped back, almost reluctantly, but I noticed how she lingered, her shoulder barely shifting away from mine. The unspoken question hovered in the air. Do we retreat or surrender to it? She let out a breath she didn't seem to realize she was holding. Maybe we shouldn't. I shook my head, though the tiniest fraction of me wanted to ignore everything else. Or maybe we should, I murmured, voice low, almost swallowed by the space between us. Her gaze softened, and she didn't answer, her silence heavier than words. We were closer than ever, yet still holding back. Just inches apart, feeling the heat, the heartbeat, the weight of everything unspoken. Then she shifted, leaning slightly against me, a whisper of surrender, and I knew that despite the hesitation, despite the fear, the pull between us had grown stronger. Closer than before, closer than either of us could admit. And the room seemed smaller, charged, dangerous, perfect for two people teetering on the edge of something they both knew they couldn't name. Her shoulder pressed against mine as we leaned over the counter, examining a stack of papers that neither of us really cared about. My fingers twitched, wanting to brush the stray hair from her face, to tuck it behind her ear, but I stopped, letting the tension linger. She smelled faintly of vanilla and something warmer I couldn't name. I can't. I shouldn't, she murmured, her voice trembling just slightly, though her eyes held mine, daring me to call her bluff. Shouldn't what? I asked softly, leaning closer, my lips almost brushing the shell of her ear. Her breath hitched, and I realized she was as aware of the nearness as I was. The warmth of her skin against mine, the soft curve of her jaw, the way her body seemed to lean toward me despite every warning. We were teetering on the edge of something neither of us could control. She faltered, swallowing hard. Her fingers brushed against mine, again, almost accidentally, and I felt a jolt run up my arm. You don't understand everything you're asking. I think I do. I whispered, my voice low, more intimate than the words should have been. Or maybe I don't, but I don't want to stop. Her lips parted slightly, a shiver running through her as if my words had struck a chord she didn't expect to feel. Her hand hovered near mine, not moving, yet inviting the brush that would close the distance between us. I'm not supposed to, she started, then broke off. Her chest pressed just a fraction closer, and I felt it, every heartbeat and tremble. Her vulnerability was palpable, and I needed, to tell her everything I felt. You can't stop me, I murmured, voice catching on the truth I hadn't said aloud until now. My hand brushed hers lightly, slowly, deliberately, and I noticed her fingers tighten around mine, not pulling away. Not if you don't ask me to. Her eyes glimmered, a mixture of longing and fear, and I could see the walls she'd built, the careful armor, beginning to crack. The hesitation, the distance we'd maintained, all of it fading with each small, electric touch. She whispered, and her lips trembled as though she might speak a confession that would change everything. I leaned in just slightly more, my forehead nearly resting against hers. The smell of her hair, the warmth of her breath, the soft rise and fall of her chest. It was intoxicating. I wanted to close the last inch, to feel the pull fully, but the world outside the moment still existed, and the risk was sharp in our minds. Her eyelashes lowered, a shiver running down her spine, as if she were teetering on the same precipice. The air between us seemed to pause, thick and electric, both of us frozen, waiting. Then, just as the space between our lips shrank to a whisper, a sudden sound. Too loud, too close. Cut through the charged silence. Her hand jerked slightly from mine, and our heads snapped toward the interruption. And in that heartbeat, everything hung, breathless, unclaimed, waiting. The door clicked again, softer this time, but enough to make both of us stiffen. My pulse raced, not just from the sound, but from the memory of how close we had been seconds ago. She turned, eyes wide, jaw tight, but her body betrayed her, the faint tremor in her hands, the way her shoulder brushed mine as she moved back slightly. I should have told you sooner, she whispered, almost to herself. I froze. Her words weren't a continuation of our conversation. They were something new, something dangerous. What do you mean? I asked, my voice low, cautious, though the tremor in my chest betrayed my anticipation. She hesitated, biting her lower lip, the movement small but sharp in its intimacy. I didn't tell you everything about my last relationship, about why I've been so careful with people, especially men your age. The air shifted, charged and heavier than before. My hand itched to reach for hers, to reassure her, but I hesitated. This wasn't just attraction now. It was the weight of her past pressing into the room, into the space between us. You lied, I whispered, more to myself than her, though the hurt in my chest wasn't overwhelming, just enough to tighten my throat. No, she said quickly, shaking her head. Not a lie. I just didn't tell the whole truth. I wasn't ready. I didn't think anyone could understand. Her hand brushed against mine as she moved past me toward the window, the contact electric despite the distance. My breath caught. I stepped closer, compelled despite every warning in my head. Try me, I said softly. I want to understand. Her glance flicked back, sharp, searching, almost accusatory, but the faintest twitch of a smile curved her lips. Then, as if remembering some invisible rule, she leaned against the sill, shoulder grazing mine, just enough to remind me that the risk hadn't gone away. She stopped again, eyes flitting to the floor. It's complicated. People would judge. They already do. I reached for her hand again, brushing my thumb over her knuckles. She didn't pull away, though the tension in her fingers was obvious. Let them, I murmured, voice low, almost a caress. What matters is this, right now us. Her lips parted slightly, and a shiver ran through her. The confession, partial as it was, had changed something, opened a door we'd both been skirting around. Yet, the stakes had risen. What felt safe yesterday now felt fragile, dangerous. I watched her carefully, the subtle rise and fall of her chest, the tremor in her hair as she shifted. The heat between us had thickened, almost suffocating, every glance loaded with desire and hesitation. Her gaze caught mine again, lingering long enough to say everything we couldn't speak. And though her body pressed almost against mine, she hesitated, on the brink of surrender, yet unwilling to cross the final line. Finally, she took a breath and stepped just slightly closer, closing the space without breaking the tension entirely. I can't keep holding back, she whispered. And I realized in that moment that whatever came next, whatever risk or judgment awaited us, there was no turning back. Our decision was already made. We just hadn't spoken it aloud yet. The room felt smaller, heavier, charged with a tension neither of us could ignore. She leaned against the counter, shoulder grazing mine, every movement deliberate and yet trembling with uncertainty. I could feel the warmth radiating from her, the faint rise and fall of her chest, the way her breath whispered against my ear whenever she spoke. She started, voice low, almost breaking. I don't know if this is right. I reached for her hand, letting my fingers brush hers lightly, lingering. Maybe it's not, I whispered, but it feels right. Right now. Her eyes searched mine, a storm of longing, fear, and hope. The weight of her hesitation pressed against me, but so did the pull, the undeniable gravity that had built between us over these weeks, these stolen moments. She tilted her head, lips parted slightly, as if expecting a reason to turn away or an excuse to lean closer. I can't pretend I'm not, she faltered, then stopped, swallowing hard. The vulnerability in her gaze made my chest ache. Neither can I admitted, voice low, steady, though my pulse was running wild. I've tried. Believe me. Her hand in mine tightened, small, trembling, and for the first time I let myself close the last inches between us. Our foreheads nearly touched, breaths mingling, eyes locked. Every hesitation, every whispered confession, every stolen touch had led to this. I've waited, she murmured, voice almost too soft to hear. And I don't know how much longer I can. I brushed a strand of hair behind her ear, careful, reverent. You don't have to wait anymore, I whispered, my lips just inches from hers. The air between us was thick, saturated with desire and fear alike. I could feel the tremor in her body, the slight quiver in her hand against mine, the pulse of her heartbeat against my palm. She inhaled sharply, a sound that almost broke the tension, yet held it perfectly suspended. We were right on the edge, both of us teetering between fear and surrender, knowing that stepping back now would undo everything, yet stepping forward might change everything forever. She started, then stopped again, her eyes closing briefly. When she opened them, there was clarity there, raw and human. No more pretense, no more guarding. I leaned just a fraction closer, and she didn't move away. Instead, she let out a breath, soft and trembling, and pressed her hand more firmly into mine. Our noses brushed, her warmth a tangible promise. We're here, I whispered. No more running. No more pretending. Her lips curved in the tiniest, most fragile smile. Not until you ask me to leave, she said, almost teasing, almost daring me. I shook my head gently, pressing my forehead against hers again. Not until you ask me to. And in that moment, the room shrank down to just us, breath, warmth, silence. And for the first time, fully, completely, we understood each other. No more walls. No more hesitation. Only this, messy, human, undeniable. We sat together on the couch, knees brushing, hands intertwined in a quiet, intimate rhythm. The room was dim, lit only by the soft glow of the lamp in the corner, and for the first time, it felt like the rest of the world had melted away. No judgment, no rules, no hesitation, just us. Her head rested lightly on my shoulder, and I could feel the subtle rise and fall of her chest, the warmth of her hair brushing my neck. I tilted my head, careful, and pressed a soft kiss to her temple. She shivered, not from surprise, but from the quiet reassurance in the touch. "I never thought," she whispered, voice low, almost lost in the hum of the room, "that I could feel this scene." "You are," I said softly, tightening my grip on her hand. "Completely. And I'm not going anywhere." She smiled, small, genuine, a mixture of relief and lingering wonder. The age gap that had once seemed so significant now felt trivial, reduced to nothing in the warmth of this moment. The fears, the doubts, the what-ifs that had haunted us both over weeks of stolen glances and hesitant touches, they were gone, suspended in the quiet understanding between us. I brushed my thumb along her knuckles, memorizing the tremor in her fingers, and she tilted her head, letting her lips brush my shoulder in a fleeting, affectionate gesture. "I wasn't sure I could trust anyone," she admitted, voice trembling just slightly. "But you made it easy to let go." "You never had to," I murmured, resting my forehead against hers. "All you had to do was let me stay." She laughed softly, the kind of laugh that slips past walls and hesitations, warm and messy and human. "And I did. I let you stay." The tension that had clung to us, thick and electric, had melted into something softer now, something tender, sensual, and unshakably real. Her fingers laced more tightly with mine, thumbs brushing, small gestures heavy with meaning. We didn't need words. Everything that had been unsaid, every longing glance, every tremor, every pause, was spoken through the rhythm of our touch. I leaned back slightly, just enough to see her face fully, to drink in the lines of her smile, the warmth in her eyes. "Stay like this," she whispered. "Always," I replied. We remained like that, shoulder to shoulder, hands intertwined, savoring the quiet intimacy. Outside, the world continued, but inside this small, imperfectly lit room, time seemed irrelevant. Nothing else mattered. Eventually, she rested her head fully against my chest, and I kissed her hair, soft, lingering, a promise rather than a gesture. We didn't rush. We didn't speak. We simply existed together, messy, human, and completely seen by each other at last. And in that clarity, that shared breath and warmth, the story finally settled into itself. Full, imperfect, and entirely ours.